You've all seen the commercials, the ads for those DNA kits that tell you all about you and where you're from.
There's something interesting about knowing your roots and where you're from. And now the process is easier than ever with mail-in DNA kits. All you have to do is put some saliva in a small tube, pack it up, send it off, and 6 to 8 weeks later, you get your results.
Finally, they found the link. After several years of trying and several failed attempts, Daryl Dusty Crawford decided to take a peek into the lives of people from about 55 generations ago. What was discovered would change how we view the history of America. A Montana man was found with the oldest Native American DNA ever found in the Americas. The shocking thing about this discovery is that it challenges all that we thought we knew about our origin and ancestry. What was discovered, and how does it shape our history? Let's find out. Daryl Dusty Crawford is a member of the Blackfoot tribe in Montana who was convinced by his brother to have his ancestry checked. His family tree goes back to when people first came to North America. But here's the shocker. Instead of being from North America, his DNA links to Polynesia, which is far across the ocean. The people who did this test managed to look further back in time than anyone else ever has. It's a big deal because this discovery might change the way we think about how people first got to America. Crawford lives in Heart Butte, Montana, which is a cozy town in the Blackfeet Indian Reservation. This reservation is huge, with about 1.5 million acres of land, and more than 17,000 people call it home. The Blackfeet Nation is one of the biggest Native American tribes in the United States, with 3 more Blackfeet reservations up in Canada. So why is Crawford's DNA test such a big deal? Well, it might make us rethink what we know about how people came to America a long, long time ago. What we used to believe might not be the whole story. Although what we know might not be the whole story, what do we know? Let's start with the incredible history of Native Americans. They've been here in the United States for a super long time, from the icy parts of Alaska to the sunny places in Florida. There are more than 9 million Native Americans here, and they belong to many different tribes, each with their cool languages, traditions, and cultures. In fact, there are over 574 American Indian tribes and Alaska Native groups. In Alaska alone, there are more than 229 of these tribes, and they speak over 300 different languages. That's a lot of diversity, right? The first Native Americans, the very first folks to live here, came all the way from Asia. They did this incredible journey by walking over a land bridge called the Bering Land Bridge. And when did they do this? Somewhere between 30,000 to 12,000 years ago. Now, how do we know all this? Scientists are like detectives, and they look at how Native Americans and Asian people are similar in a lot of ways, like the things they made, how they look, and even their DNA. They think the folks who started it all probably came from Siberia or Mongolia in Asia. So, how did they get to America? Back in 1590, a Spanish missionary named Fray José de Acosta had a pretty wild idea. He was the first person to suggest that there might be a bridge of land connecting Asia to North America. At the time, people were scratching their heads, wondering how the first Americans even got here. Acosta thought differently. He believed that ancient hunters from Asia came over to North America using a land bridge or a narrow pathway up north. He even thought this bridge was still around while he was alive. Jump ahead to the 1700s, when a Russian Tsar named Peter the Great had a brilliant plan. He sent a guy named Vitus Bering on an adventure to the Bering Strait area. Back then, maps sometimes showed a big chunk of land across from the Chukchi Peninsula. But nobody had any real proof that people actually crossed that stretch of water. In the 1700s, 2 brave voyages happened, first in 1724 and then in 1741. And Vitus Bering confirmed what people near the Chukchi Peninsula already knew. There was land and people across that water. These folks had been trading and traveling across the Bering Strait for thousands of years. And if that's not enough, in 1778, an English guy named Captain James Cook came along and made super detailed maps of the Alaskan coast. It was like turning on the lights in a dark room, showing the Bering Strait area to the whole world. With all this news about Bering and Cook's adventures spreading everywhere, the idea of people migrating between Asia and North America became a big deal. It's like discovering pieces of a puzzle that have been missing for centuries. In the early 1800s, American scientists and nature experts started checking out old sites on the East Coast, then slowly moved west. The things they found suggested that people didn't start in North America. They came from somewhere else. But they didn't know exactly where or how until around the mid-1920s, when they began hunting for clues about how people got to North America. And now here's David M. Hopkins, a geology fan who had a blast exploring Alaska. He played a key role in figuring out the story of Beringia. He worked with experts from different fields to make some really exciting discoveries about the Bering Land Bridge. They even solved the mystery of the plants on the bridge. Some people thought it was all icy, like today's Arctic, but Hopkins and his crew found proof that it was more diverse. Plants grew in different ways depending on the land's height and water levels, making the bridge a green passage for the first travelers. But Hopkins didn't stop there. He brought together experts from different areas to build a strong case for the Beringia Land Bridge theory. Let's take time to look more in depth about the Beringia Land Bridge theory. Around 30,000 to 11,000 years ago, early humans known as Paleo-Indians started exploring the Americas. They had a special route called Beringia, a land that connected Siberia and Alaska. This was no ordinary place. It was a land of ice, thanks to a massive ice dome called the Laurentide Glacier. It was like a giant ice dome towering over Hudson Bay, taller than any skyscraper you've ever seen. It was the boss of the neighborhood between 20,000 and 18,000 years ago. During this time known as the Ice Age, the Great Plains were like a fictional animal kingdom. There were mammoths, musk oxen, caribou, horses, camels, bison, elk, lions, wolves, and even tiny creatures like Arctic ground squirrels, Arctic shrews, and lemmings. But as the ice started to melt and the world changed, some of these animals couldn't adapt, so they disappeared between 12,000 and 10,000 years ago. For those that don't really understand what the Ice Age is, the Ice Age wasn't just one long freeze. Our planet has actually had 5 ice ages in its history. Right now, we're in the most recent one called the Quaternary, which began around 2.6 million years ago. During an ice age, both of the Earth's poles are covered in ice. And when the ice spreads and covers a big part of the planet, that's called glaciation. There have been 12 of these in the last million years. The last big freeze, known as the last glaciation, hit its peak around 18,000 years ago and finally melted away about 11,700 years ago. It was during this time, around 15,000 years ago, that experts believe humans traveled from Siberia to Alaska. Back then, you could actually walk from one place to the other because the sea levels were way lower, about 400 feet lower. Today, the Bering Sea stands between Siberia and Alaska, making it impossible to cross on foot. But let's discuss a recent and thrilling discovery by archaeologists from the University of Alaska at Fairbanks. They dug up something super special, the remains of 2 tiny Ice Age babies, a whopping 11,500 years old. These babies are believed to be the youngest humans ever found who lived during the time of the first Americans. What makes this discovery even more amazing is that they found not 1 but 2 sets of precious remains. Among the ancient bones were the remains of a baby who sadly passed away shortly after birth and a late-term fetus. They were found in a special pit under a fireplace where a 3-year-old child had been cremated. But there's more to this story. Right alongside the infants were some special tools and antler sticks that had been covered with a red paint-like material called ochre. It's believed that these were placed there as part of a special ceremony to honor the young ones. Since we've provided enough backstory, let us take a look at DNA ancestry testing. What is DNA ancestry testing and how is it done? DNA ancestry testing, also known as genetic genealogy, helps people who are into family history learn more than what they get from talking to family members or looking at old records. By looking at differences in our DNA, it gives hints about where our ancestors might have lived and how different families are connected. When people come from the same backgrounds, they tend to have similar DNA patterns. The closer 2 people or families are related, the more of these patterns they share. So how is it done? It all starts with a DNA test kit. These kits may look different, but they usually have a little tube where you spit some saliva. Once you've filled that tube, you send it off to a lab. At the lab, the scientists take the DNA from your spit and focus on specific parts of your genetic code, which they call the human genome. To do this, they use a special chip called a microarray. This chip can look at many spots in your genome all at once, like a detective with lots of clues. Now, our DNA is pretty similar to all of us, but some tiny differences make each of us unique. These differences are called variants, and they're linked to things like our health and where our ancestors come from. Scientists want to find these variants to tell you about your ancestry. To find these variants, they first split the DNA from your spit into smaller pieces. These tiny DNA pieces go onto the microarray chip. Think of the microarray like a board with thousands of spots. Some spots have regular DNA, while others have the special genetic variants they're looking for. Your DNA from the spit connects to the DNA on the chip. If you have a particular variant, your DNA sticks to the spot on the chip with the same variant. The company doing your DNA test then compares your results to reference panels. These reference panels have data about the variants tied to different ancestries. So if your DNA matches with a variant common in, let's say, Europeans, the company tells you that you probably have European ancestors. They look at all the parts of your genome they've tested to figure out the percentages of your ancestors from different places. Each company that does DNA ancestry testing has its way of doing this. They use their secret sauce called a proprietary ancestry algorithm. This algorithm is like their secret recipe, looking at lots of genetic data, including reference panels, public databases like the 1000 Genomes Project, and their own customers' data. Here's the thing. The accuracy of your ancestry report depends on these reference panels. They have info from people whose ancestors go back a long time in a particular place, like Africa, Europe, Asia, or South America. So what did they discover in Crawford's DNA that challenges what we think we know? Crawford decided to take a journey through time to unravel the secrets of his ancestry through CRI genetics, and the results are nothing short of astonishing. CRI genetics specializes in providing folks with a biogeographical ancestry, which basically means they help you figure out where your genes fit into the grand story of the human species. Crawford's DNA adventure took him back 55 generations with a 99% accuracy rate. That's like finding a needle in a haystack because ancestral secrets tend to get a little foggy way back in history. In fact, CRI genetics shared that tracing anyone's roots in the Americas as far back as Crawford's DNA is a remarkable feat they've never achieved before. So, what did his DNA unveil? Brace yourself for this exciting tale. According to CRI, it appears that Crawford's ancestors embarked on an epic journey from the Pacific. They made their way to the South American coast and then headed north. It's a theory, but what a fascinating one. But that's not all. Crawford's DNA reveals he belongs to mtDNA haplogroup B2, which is relatively rare in Alaska and Canada. This group has its roots in Arizona, dating back an impressive 17,000 years. They're one of the significant Native American groups known as clans, tracing their heritage back to 4 incredible female ancestors, Ai, Ina, Chie, and Sachi. Crawford's DNA proudly proclaims him as a descendant of Aina. His group's closest relatives outside the Americas can be found in Southeast Asia, which adds a thrilling twist to the tale. Now let's talk about his Native American ancestry. The results show 83% of Native American heritage, with a remarkable 73% coming from the same heritage, making it a unique and special story. But Crawford's DNA journey isn't just about Native heritage. It's a true global melting pot. His DNA also carries traces of European at 9.8%, East Asian at 5.3%, with strong ties to Japanese and Southern Han Chinese ancestry, South Asian at 2%, including Sri Lankan Tamil, Punjabi, Gujarati Indian, and Bengali roots, and even a dash of African at 0.2%, with connections to Mende in Sierra Leone and African Caribbean. Now, here's the bittersweet part of the story. Crawford, the hero of this incredible genetic adventure, unfortunately, passed away due to a heart attack shortly before the results of CRI's genetic testing were complete. His daughter shares the mixed emotions of hearing this remarkable news. "I just wished my dad was here to hear this news. I can already see his eyes lighting up with that grin on his face. It's bittersweet news with a little heartache." While we live in our modern-day life with several millions migrating daily and setting up families in more foreign countries, it is very important not to lose sight of where we came from. Do you have any surprising ancestral findings? Do well to share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for watching and see you at the next one.